भगवत्पादं शङ्करं लोकशङ्करं शङ्करं शङ्कराचार्यं केशवं बादरायणं सूत्रभाष्यकृतौ वन्दे भगवन्तौ पुनः पुनः ईश्वरो गुरुरात्मेति मूर्तिभेदविभागिने व्योमवद्व्याप्तदेहाय दक्षिणामूर्तये नमः। कुकारस्त्वन्धकारो वै ऋकारस्त्वनिवर्तकः अन्धकारनिरोधित्वात् गुरुरित्यभिधीयते। सदाशिवसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम्। ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्ति। So for these classes, we will add an additional Shanti mantra, which you kindly repeat after me. This is the second verse of the Advaita Makaranda and really encompasses the central theme of these classes. So I think I have adopted that as a Shanti mantra for the time being. So you can just follow after me. Ahamasmi sadabhami kadachit nahamapriyaha kadachit nahamapriyaha brahmaiva aham atasiddham brahmaiva aham atasiddham Satchidananda Lakshanam. So one more time. Ahamasmi sadabhami, ahamasmi sadabhami, kadachit nahamapriyaha, kadachit nahamapriyaha, brahmaiva aham brahmaiva aham atasiddham, brahmaiva aham atasiddham. Satchidananda Lakshanam. So we will add that to our Shanti mantras before each class. So since we have had a few gaps of teaching, I'm actually just 1 week itself is a big gap. It really should be done, 3 or 4 classes a day for these things to become very effective, but we have to go with what we have. And then we also missed the 4th of July one, so there's been quite a bit of a gap. So what I think would be good is to recap some of the basic concepts, and I think I was mentioning it to those of you that were just assembled outside, and let me just say it for the rest of them, that my plan is that we will continue with this in advanced introduction to Vedanta, not just for a few weeks, but for a few months, maybe 4 months, 5 months. I'm beginning to have the relevant material which encompasses the central ideas, which will take more than just this. All this is still based on Swami Akhandananda's teachings, but more than just a chapter here, chapter 2, it's kind of like I'm bringing it from some of the other areas that I've also been reading, so that it makes I think, a more comprehensive introduction. So that's going to take me about 4 to 5, maybe even 6 months to do. We'll see how that goes. And then we will select a text to go after that. So somewhat of a different thinking that I have now compared to what I used to do before. Anyway. All right, so Advaita Vedanta is also called Uttaramimamsa. As you know, this is all really, you should know all this. I'm just reviewing it for your recollection. There should be nothing new. If there is something new, then you kindly send me an email and I will explain it to you, but I expect that you know most of this. So, there are 6 schools of thought in India, and Vedanta is the culmination of the Vedas and forms what is called the latter analysis. Uttara Mimamsa means the latter analysis. Purva Mimamsa means the former analysis. So we know this by now, you know all this by now, that these two are not competing schools of thought. It's not as though you have to choose one versus the other. It's not like that. Exactly the same issue in the Bhagavad Gita, which is pointed out, which confused Arjuna to no limits, that there is karma and there is jnanam. So the karma and jnanam are not competing things. It's not like, should I do this, should I be active in my life, or should I be meditative and just close my eyes? Which of the two should I do it? It's not like that. And so the whole teaching of the Bhagavad Gita is that they are not competing, they are supplementary. You have to really go through the action before, and while you are doing the action, you should have an attitude of seva to the world, seva to yourself, seva to Ishvara, and it takes a while for us to change our attitude, because when we are born, the first thing is that we are taking ourselves to be an individual. So to have a sense of doing only for the individual is very reasonable. This is the way it should be. So the jivatvam, the sense of individuality, which is the beginning of our lives, is very reasonable. And all the rest of it pertains to it. Swami Akhandananda, I think, pointed out as well, very well. He basically said that once you make a mistake, and the mistake we make is, I am not an unlimited person, I am a limited person. This is the mistake. It's a huge mistake. We went over this in the Aparoksha Anubhuti when we had the retreat, and if you study the Aparoksha Anubhuti, you will see that this particular idea by Adi Shankara is really hammered on. This is a huge mistake. This is stupidity. It's kind called Brahma in a very effusive manner, but it means idiotic thinking. So this is the mistake. So now Swami Akhandananda says, this is very interesting, I have never not seen this analysis before. He says, once you make that mistake, you support it fully. And what do we mean by that? What we mean by that is that all the rest of my life is to support this mistake. Like, for example, I am the body. When you make a mistake, how are you going to make the mistake? I am just a limited person. No. You have to have some body. So the very body itself is a support for the mistake. And the support for the body is also part of the support for the mistake. That I have to take care of my body. It's very, very reasonable. That I have to be very self-centered. I have to make sure that I don't go hungry. Is also part of the mistake. But this mistake is really a part of the bigger mistake that I'm making a mistake. Isn't it? Then this is not enough. You don't go around in the life saying I'm a body, I'm a body, I'm a body. You don't do that. So then there is the mind, your personality. So all the support for the mind. Who am I? What am I supposed to do? What should I do? What will give me more pleasure? What will give me more future? Artha, Kama, Dharma, all of those kinds of things. They are mental support for the mistake. So it's kind of like you develop the software to make sure that your basic mistake is well-rounded. So really speaking, that mistake is the original cause of my looking at myself as an individual. So all I'm saying is that all what Vedanta is saying is that you're taking yourself to be a human being is very reasonable, but it's a huge mistake. Huge mistake. And how do you correct that mistake? It is so embedded in the way I view myself that it's not just going to be somebody going in, hey, you're making a mistake. It's not like that. In the case of the 10th man, for example, by just simply saying, hey, you forgot to count yourself. That was it. It isn't like that, because now my self-estimation is so solid, so comprehensive, that if somebody just comes in, it's kind of like, this is also said in Vedanta, that you are so deeply asleep that if somebody touches you and say, hey, wake up, you don't wake up. You don't wake up. If you're lightly asleep, then simply will do that. In fact, it is said in Vedanta that if somebody is very deeply asleep, the best way to wake that person up is to call that person by name. Because the nama, whatever the nama is given to my parents, becomes my innate identity. And the best way to invoke that identity is to call somebody by the name. Otherwise, you'll say, wake up, wake up, wake up. You don't wake up. Anyway, all I'm saying is that our self-identity is so pakka that it requires a lot of work to change my thinking. And so that work is done by karma yoga. That work is what is done by leading a grihastha life. So the ashramas of the life are also part of breaking that thing down. And so in the teaching of Vedanta, the whole life is very meaningful. So the brahmacharya, which is the first part of the life, is now followed by the most important second part of the life, which is grihastha. And the grihastha is not just to do the karma, but to do a karma in such a way that your innate sense of individuality dissolves. because Ishvara is the one who is really Antaryami, is your real nature, is your real nature. That's the antithesis of the mistake. But that mistake will not be accepted by you until your individuality is slowly dissolved. So the nishkarsha, what is called nishkarsha, meaning the essence, what do we get out of this, is this, that karma yoga and the life of action, if done properly, is not a competing to jnanam. It is a preparation for jnanam. So this is what is called Purva Mimamsa. And the Purva Mimamsa is sense of yajna. So this we will do. I'm thinking. I'm studying a text by Swami Akhandananda, which is called Shiva Sankalpa Sutra. And I've had only 2 sutras that I've been reading for the last 2 months. It is so beautiful that I'm thinking this is the text I might take next. Or another thought is that I will do it in the retreat of during the 18 or 19 classes of the retreat at the ashram next year. So I haven't decided that. But regardless, this is a very beautiful text. In the second Sankalpa Sutra, Shiva Sankalpa Sutra, yajna is accented. How do you do prayers? What is the purpose of your going to the temple? How do you lead your life? So this is all yajna based. So it's very beautiful. We'll look into that in more detail. But for now, the Purva Mimamsa, which means really understanding the yajna, the chanting, the Vedanta, is useless, is completely useless until it culminates into Uttara Mimamsa. You get some secondary benefit if you don't go into Jnanam, Uttara Mimamsa. What is the secondary benefit? You'll have a better life next life. You will enjoy some Swargaloka for a while, for a short time. Short time. As they say that time flies when you're having fun. It may actually be thousands of years, but it looks like it's just like that. And then it's over. It's just like going to Hawaii. Hawaii looks like, oh, I'm going to Hawaii for 2 weeks. And immediately it just goes like that, and you have time to come back into the middle seat of United Airlines. It just, that is the worst thing, that whenever you go to Hawaii, this is what happens. Somehow or the other, you get squeezed between 2 people, and you miss your Hawaii even more. Lichi knows this quite well. She finally decided to sell her condominium at Hawaii. So the Purva Mimamsa, unless it culminates into Uttara Mimamsa, it's useless. The purpose of our life really. People ask, what is life all about? Is to gain unconditional freedom, which is our nature. And we knock around life after life after life, reaching to that point. But we must understand this is what our goal is, this is where we are going, and the sooner we get there, the better. And don't waste any time, according to the Vedanta. move over to Uttara Mimamsa. And the worst thing that can happen is that whatever the teachings in the Uttara Mimamsa are not immediately fruitful for me. That's very likely. That is exactly what's going to happen. But until you begin to get an introduction to it, Shravanam, repeatedly, it's not going to help. So nothing is wasted. This is exactly what we need to do. So this is what Uttara Mimamsa is. So now we say that the Uttara Mimamsa or Vedanta, Advaita. So now we should say Uttara Mimamsa means, another word for Uttara Mimamsa is Advaita Vedanta. There is no such thing as, this is what exactly some people say. What Vedanta are you following? Are you following Dvaita Vedanta or Advaita Vedanta? This is exactly like, have you stopped beating your wife yet? Even the question it doesn't make any sense. There is no such thing as Dvaita Vedanta. Vedanta means Advaita Vedanta. A complete oneness. This is what it is, because without that oneness, without that Brahman, life is without Ishvara, without the unity of Jiva and the Ishvara, the life is not complete. So Vedanta means Advaita Vedanta. So the Advaita Vedanta has a unique understanding of the plurality in the world. So I'm actually spending a little bit more time doing this, but I'm really following a script of the advanced, and I'll tell you how we began 5 classes ago and how we are going to progress. So I sat down and really thought about this quite a bit. So the Advaita Vedanta is faced with a shrishti, a feeling of oneness, the understanding of oneness, is having to cope with plurality, uncertainty, problems. So how do we approach this? What is it that we need to do or understand or know in terms of the Srishti? This is what's the important thing aspect of it. So here we say that the plurality has to be viewed from the standpoint of truth. Plurality is what it is. Plurality means Dvaitam. Is something that I am faced with in my life. So the question is, how do I view it so that it leads me to unity rather than plurality? What is it that I need to do? So that is what is said is, you have to understand the nature of the truth of plurality. This is what we need to do. So the plurality, leave plurality as it is, don't fight with it, instead make your Uttara Mimamsa an analysis of the satyam of the plurality. So there, We also, another we say is that the way we look at something, so the way we understand something, the way we conclude something is what is called karta tantram. Karta tantram means, so Swami Paramatmananda also pointed this out, if you recall, when he was here. Same thing. Karta tantram means the way you look at it. Now, the way you look at it may or may not be truthful, because a vastu is called vastu tantram. Not vastu is called, but the truth of the vastu is vastu tantram, not karta tantram. Typical example is that a rope is taken to be something other than a rope. It can be taken to be a mala, can be taken to be a hose, can be taken to be a snake. So what a person can take a rope, if it is not properly understood, is karta tantram. It's based on your own background. If you have had a lot of fear of snakes, then you might take it to be a snake. If you have been watering your lawn a lot in the last few days, you're likely to take it to be a hose. If you have been hanging around the temple and you have been giving malas to people or having it yourself, or you visited a tirtha sthanam, then you might treat it as a mala. So this is all basically based on karta tantram. But the vastu tantram is to take the rope as it is. So therefore, Uttara Mimamsa says that please, what you need to see is your view of life is karta tantram. And this we will spend a lot of time on. So this is what it means is that each of us have a huge background behind us. Huge background. Multiple lives. Multiple relationships. Multiple times we have been disappointed. We have been happy. Oh, so many times. All of this is vyavaharika sat, where you have children that you love, grandchildren, wives, husbands, friends. They all disappear. Just like that. Then a new one starts. New birth, new relationships, new mother, new father, new friends. This has been going on for a long time. In the process, you develop certain attitudes, certain thoughts, certain tendencies. And so this is what Swami Chinmayananda used to do about vasanas. And the more I now understand from the teachings of other people that this vasana is a very important one. And the vasana, which means the way you are as a person, your attitudes, your conclusions, your relationships. And those determine how you view the world. Whether you view the rope as a snake or as a mala or a hose completely depends on the various background vasanas that you have. So the karta tantram has to be transformed into Vastu Tantra. So the Atma is a Vastu Tantra. The Atma has to be seen exactly as it is, not as you think it is. So the Uttara Mimamsa is the process by where we turn our view of myself, Ishvara, world, in a very factual manner. Not, so this is what it's called, now we can talk about it already. This is what is called translating from Vyavaharika Sat to Paramarthika Sat. So this is the view of Srishti that each of one of us needs to develop, needs to understand. And so the Paramarthika Sat is one, but Vyavaharika Sat can be many. Here Swami Maheshanand ji had given a very beautiful example, which I'll bring in. He was saying, what is wealth? When you say, I'm very rich, what is wealth? Let's discuss that. So you can say, so the wealth is, there are many different forms of it, like health is wealth and so on. But just look at pure wealth, which is money. Okay? So what is the most accepted view of money in the whole world? It's gold. Gold is the gold standard of wealth. Very interesting, really. Bhagwan has made this metal which doesn't tarnish. It's very not easily available, but available, and it becomes a gold standard of wealth. Okay? Now, you cannot go around flaunting gold because there is not enough to go around in pieces. So what do? You make currency. So the currency becomes as if gold. So $100 currency is worth a little bit more gold than a $1 currency. So the currency becomes the alternate for gold. But the currency is by convention. It is by a mutual agreement. How powerful is the dollar? How powerful is the yuan? How powerful is the rupee, the ruble? It all depends on convention. And also it goes up and down. And it's also very conditional. If we all have that experience. We come back from India and we have a wad full of rupees. And you try to give it to somebody here, and say, what is this? I don't understand what you're giving me. He says, oh, I'm sorry, I was giving you dollars, it was rupees. Not understood. And then Modi ji demonetizes the 1,000 rupee note, gone. So this is what is called Vyavaharika Sat. So the currency is Vyavaharika Sat, the gold is the Paramarthika Sat. Beautiful example. So it is good that you deal with people, you deal with situations and so on. For the time being, it seems to be okay. But there is no truth in it. No enduring truth in it. Paramarthika Sat is Ishvara. Vyavaharika Sat is Jiva. So the Vyavaharika Sat has to develop. So the Vyavaharika Sat is also Paramarthika Sat, but not taken it to be like that. Our very traditional example. The various room spaces are no different from total space. But they are not understood to be like that. They are taken to be just like a room space. I'm only here. I'm not there. Like a car space, the car space doesn't move, but it appears to move. Car space is always space, doesn't move. Not only that, but now if you just expand that, when you talk about space and this, that, or the other, you can say, oh, that's just space. What about me, the individual? I was just, when I was driving to the class today, it just, for several moments, I had that feeling. My goodness, I'm not moving. I am the Brahman. I am the Atma. I am the Sat. And the car is moving. And then on the freeway, I didn't even have to steer it. There's a lot going on. And it looks like I'm moving. I'm now going. But I'm not going. My Atma is the same. So it is not just the space, but we have to look at ourselves. And so we are just focusing completely on Vyavaharika Sat, not the Paramarthika Sat. And the Vyavaharika Sat is not any different from the Paramarthika Sat. It is just a Kartatantram. So this is how Uttaramimamsa deals with plurality. And eventually we will see that the plurality is just like currency. It is a pretend gold. It is not the real gold. It is just the way it appears to me. And I am caught up with it, and which is reasonable that I'm caught up with it, because that's how I was born. That's the start of the whole thing. But that should not be the end of the whole thing. This is what we have to go through. This is what we should go through. This is what we should graduate to. So here, going back to what we had started with, and I will develop this in much more depth than we have done so far, but just to, because this is still a form of a recap, just to tell you where we were and how we're going to go forward. We started with an analysis of Jnanam and Vijnana, and Prakarshena Jnanam, Prajnanam. You can do it Vijnanam or Prajnanam. But this is what we started with, right? So Prajnanam was the basis of the worldly jnana. So this is a analysis of the Chit aspect of Ananda. So this particular analysis we are going to spend a lot of time on a little bit later. Okay? So this will form a kind of like a key point of analysis. But I just want to just want to say this is how we started with. Okay? So now we can see some aspect of prajnanam and jnanam now in the analysis of Paramarthika Satyam versus Vyavaharika Satyam. So another way to look at this same analysis is that of the pure electricity and applied electricity. So prajnanam is the pure electricity. Jnanam, which means worldly knowledge. Worldly knowledge meaning, do you know a particular language? This is worldly knowledge. Do you know how the YouTube works? Worldly knowledge. Do you know the way to San Francisco? Worldly knowledge. In the worldly knowledge, it is applied knowledge, and also it requires both a knower and known. So in worldly knowledge, both the knower and known are required. You cannot do without it, because you cannot say, I know. Somebody just walks around and somebody says, I know. So the worldly knowledge, it would not make sense to simply say, I know. So people will say, you know what? No, I know. Okay, I guess you're talking a language that I don't understand. But if I know, say, somebody says, this is interesting. People used to say, do you know the time? What is the answer to that? Yes. That's not the right answer. Yes, no, I know. The person says, tell me what the right time is. So if somebody says, do you know the time? You'll say, yes. You'll say, what a strange person. So similarly, when you say, I know, they'll say, so what a strange person. You'll say, I know the way to this. That's meaningful. So the Vyavaharika Sat must require a knower and a known. Both are important. This is a very important thing, by the way. This we are going into, you think that this is very obvious, why are we talking about this? This has huge implications. And so we will get into this in much more detail later, as I mentioned. But for now, I just want to give you a continuation of this. So, prajnanam and jnanam is, in that sense, pure knowledge and applied knowledge. And what we will say is, later on, that you cannot have applied knowledge until you have pure knowledge. The applied knowledge, that you cannot have an electrical appliance without electricity. You can have an appliance, but the appliance, the word even the appliance also doesn't make any sense. Because the question is, what kind of an appliance is it? So the very word, certainly, and then you can say this is an electrical appliance, this is a fan, this is a heater. Then it makes sense. But in order for the appliance to be there needs to be something that drives the appliance. Prajnanam drives jnanam. And if I know what this relationship is, what is the nature of prajnanam, then I am getting somewhere. And so we need to translate from applied knowledge in our life to pure knowledge. Pure knowledge is prajnanam, which is the Atma. And so we need to know how this thing is working. What is the plurality? How does the plurality comes in? And what is the nature of it? What is the Paramarthika Sat and what is the Vyavaharika Sat? And until we go through this analysis, for my mind, it's not as though you're doing it for someone else, but you're the one who is doing Karta Tantram, you and I. And we have to do Vastu Tantram. Not do Vastu Tantram, but to know Vastu Tantram. This is the process that we have to go through. Then, one of the things that we talked about is, I'm still revising, by the way. All this is revision. I'm giving a little bit more color to it and so on, but this is still revision. So to understand, the next point on this is that in Vyavaharika Sat, Parinama is useful and possible. Parinama means change. So a classical example of parinama in our Shastra is milk becoming yogurt. It's called parinama karanam. Classical. So it's a one-way change. Once the milk becomes yogurt, you cannot make milk out of the yogurt. You can make lassi, buttermilk. You can add water to it, but you cannot get the same thing. This is called parinama karanam. In Vyavaharika Sat, parinama karanam is possible and found. In fact, this is what Vyavahara is all about. One thing changes to something else, and in fact, even there you have what is called Vyapaka Vyapya Sambandha, which means that you are the pervader and pervaded. Sambandha, all that is possible. So we saw that an iron ball is pervaded, a fire is the pervader. All that is possible in Vyavaharika Sat. Okay? This is the interplay of life, of the physical bodies, and in fact from pure electricity to applied electricity, from Chaitanya to Jada, all of that is possible. In Paramarthika Sat, this is not possible. The question is, you should be, I hope you ask that question, why not? And you should also have the answer, we should also have the answer, why this is not possible in Paramarthika Sat. Because, what is Paramarthika Sat? Paramarthika Sat means Sat. And Sat means Trikalepi abhaditam, means that it never loses its identity no matter what. That is called Sat. One which is, it doesn't require any suffixes and prefixes. You cannot say one which is like in the case of the currency. A currency is useful only in India, not in the United. In Indian rupee, it is not useful in America. Although they are trying to make it international, I think that's going to take quite a while. The Indian currency is only useful now in Bangladesh. I just found this out yesterday. Because Bangladesh is so short of cash. So this is what happens. First you tell them, can the Indian rupee also work in Bangladesh? Bangladeshis will say no. We are a separate country. We have our own, I think it's called rupiah, I'm not sure. Then their economy is going down the drain. I believe they only have $34 billion worth of cash, and they're bleeding. And they still want to do trade. So now they say that instead of doing it in dollars, which takes a lot of, there's a sort of like a cut. So it's like using a credit card. 6% goes to Visa or MasterCharge. You only get a little bit left. Not little bit, but 94% left. But in rupee, they say we'll give it to you free of cost. So now they are beginning to use rupee. In any case, a rupee is very conditional. It cannot really go anywhere. And so really speaking, the Paramarthika Sat is not like that. Paramarthika Sat means Sat. So therefore we can say that Parinama cannot work in Paramarthika Sat. Why not? Because the truth of milk has been lost into the truth of yogurt. So this is conditional truth, isn't it? The truth of milk is very conditional. You have to keep it refrigerated. If you leave it outside, it'll spoil. So Parinama cannot work in Paramarthika. But now we still see plurality. And the Vedanta Uttara Mimamsa says plurality is also Paramarthika Sat. How is that possible? How is that possible? Because it's changing. I can say that for Vyavaharika, but not in Paramarthika Sat. But what is the situation? So there we say that in Paramarthika Sat, another phenomena is possible, which is called Vivarta. Not Parinama, but Vivarta. And one of these days I can go into the etymology of how Vivarta is. I think Swami Akhandananda has explained that in one of the books. I've forgotten the exact, Sanskrit etymology, but Vivarta. What is Vivarta? I think Swami Dayananji had given this explanation. Excuse me a second. As you know, Swami Dayananji had given this explanation, which I think I read a few times. It's called Parinama is Swaswarupa Parityagena Rupantara Apatti is Parinama. Swaswarupa Parityagena, by giving up its original form, taking up another form is called Parinama. Swaswarupa Parityagena Rupantara Apatti iti Parinama Sat. Vivarta is Swaswarupa Aparityagena Rupantara Apatti. It is Vivarta. It changes without changing its original form. It's called Vivarta. So now, even in Vyavahara, we have various examples. So the examples are that of clay becoming a pot, total space becoming room space, water becoming a wave, gold becoming an ornament. These are all vivarta upadana sat. This is a very beautiful thing. So even in vyavahara, you don't have to have parinama alone. You can have vivarta also. Vivarta in vyavahara can apply to paramarthika. So plurality doesn't mean that it is a permanent change of the Atma. In fact, even the mind, leave aside the Atma. So when this is the analysis of the Shiva Sankalpa Sutra, Tanme Shiva Sankalpamastu. We are going to take 5 verses sooner or later. This is from Shukla Yajurveda. So the Krishna Yajurveda has the same Shiva Sankalpa Sutra, but 26 verses. So we won't have time for doing that. But Swami Akhandananda has written a text from the Shukla Yajurveda, which has 5 verses. And the first verse is a very detailed analysis of the mind, how the mind works. What's the nature of the mind? How does it become plural? How does it become singular? Even the mind can become singular. Even the mind can become plural. Leave aside the Atma. So the Vivarta Upadana Karanam, the mind itself is the Vivarta Upadana Karanam. One mind you are looking at plurality, another mind you are looking at your own singularity. It's one the same thing. Doesn't really change. Very beautifully done. I think I'll take several classes just on the first verse. It just became very clear to me. Had never been done before for me until I read that. So we will go in, we'll do that. So this is what is reasonable in Paramarthika Sat. Vivarta is reasonable in Paramarthika Sat. And it is. So there we saw the next thing that we have seen so far. I'm just giving you a revision of all this. Next thing we see is, where is the Paramarthika Sat? So we can now eliminate the prefix Paramarthika. We can just call it Sat. Satyam or Sat. Sat means what is without any change, what is without any conditionality, what is independent of even time, space. What is the truth? Where is it? So there we saw that there are 3 possibilities, right? So I'm just revising. This should wake your memory up based on the last few classes. So I'm just revising it. We saw there are 3 possibilities. One is that it's not there at all. It's not there at all. There's no such thing as Paramarthika Sat. By the way, 99% of the people in the world think this way. There is no Paramarthika Sat. There is nothing which is changeless. Everything is changing. Even science, so-called science, which is just informed stupidity, really speaking. And what we call science is nothing but an analyzed stupidity. It is what is called anirvachaniya. Swami Maheshananji, I think, pointed out the best. He had so many different examples on this. He said, it is like Einstein, when he talked about this, some of my studies on Einstein and so on came to fore. Einstein solved a lot of things. He was able to see the truth of a lot of things. But then there was this small thing left over which says, this I don't know. Science is like that. Then science becomes very, sure of itself. Or we know exactly how this works. This is it is there. Or do you know everything? No, there's a couple of things we don't know. This is what is called anirvachaniya. You cannot, until you know something completely, even if you know 99% of it, it still remains unknown. Swami Maheshananji had given this example, a worldly example. He says, there was a Ayurvedic doctor who he says is the best in the whole world. Very experienced. And you go to that, there is hardly any disease. Swamiji had said in one of the texts that he didn't know about. He says, just tell me anything and I will tell you how this, and it would almost work in all cases. But once in a while, it would not work. In fact, that reminds me of my own personal life. So my maternal grandfather, Dr. Shankar Das Mehra, was a very well-known homeopathic doctor in Amritsar. And I still remember there was one room. He was also, by the way, a Vedanta teacher. And so even though I never really studied with him, and he was very frustrated. When I was growing up, I was like 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. And he would try very much, and I would say, But somehow, and the Swamis would all come to our home, they will all be discussed, and on the side, they will all be discussing the self. And I would say, what is all this self nonsense and all that? I never really got anything, out of it. Somehow my samskaras were that when I came to this country, I started studying the Bhagavad Gita, one thing led to the other, and I got back. So I cannot say the samskaras were not there. Anyway, so my grandfather was also, so he was a very interesting person. He was a reasonably successful business person. He used to own a factory to make clothing. So he was a cloth, and so that's how he earned. But we were not very rich. We were somewhat, I would say, lower than middle class. Money was a problem. We had not had enough money. But I lived with my grandparents because I was allergic to tur dal, so I could not stay in any place else. And my parents, when they were in Bihar, there were no school. So they sent me to live with my grandparents. It was a beautiful existence. I had one problem in my life. I was very asthmatic. My asthma was so bad. In those days, there were no medicines, no cure. I would suffer, I nearly died sometimes, and so on. So give you the idea of anirvachaniyam. This is my whole trigger of that thought. So my grandfather Nanaji was a very well-known homeopathic doctor. I remember this one room where people would come and visit him, and they would almost say, this is the one. Do you know, none of his worked on me, his own grandson. None of it. And he was visibly frustrated. He'd say, पता नहीं क्या हो गया है. भगवान को ईश्वर की करते थे कि इसको ठीक कर दे. And I was the one who was suffering. I had to close the door because I could not breathe at all. It wasn't until much later that my asthma became much better, and I still get bouts of it. But anyway, here's a person who was, so Swami Maheshananji was saying that this Ayurvedic doctor was wonderful. But now and then he would get frustrated. That means there is something left out that you don't know. So this is what the world is. There's something about it is which is inexplainable, cannot be done. Anyway, so there are three possibilities of Sat. This is what we were talking about. Let's finish that topic, and then perhaps that will be, I'll finish the class with that. And then we'll pick up the last part next time, which is the culmination of the understanding of Kena Upanishad, Pratibodha Viditam Matam. So we probably won't have time to do that until next time, but we will tackle that. So that will complete the revision, and then we'll go forward. So there are three possibilities of Sat. One is, it is not there. Not there. And lot of not only the general public, but even science and schools of thought also feel that there is no such thing as Sat. Vedanta says, what are you talking about? In fact, Vedanta says there is nothing but Sat alone. It's just the opposite. There's nothing but except Sat. This is the glory, the Mahima. What a beautiful, it's just amazing. How lucky we are to get an introduction to this. This is called, so our Shastra says, yes. Shastra says, yes, Sat is there. So the second question is, where is it? Where is the Sat? Because I don't find any Sat. Okay, I have Shraddha in my Shastra. At least now I have graduated from, instead of knocking around science and so on, at least now I have come to the right place. When I was at the Sailorsburg Ashram, recently in our retreat, so we were doing satsang after a class, and one of the students there had this question. He said, Vedanta makes a lot of sense. It's good. But now science has progressed a lot. And what does Vedanta understand about the new science, which was not there before? We had not discovered many of the things. What do you tell that person? Somehow what that person is, that he's very much in love with science, which is okay for Vyavaharika Sat. But in Paramarthika Sat, you cannot say what does Vedanta now think of the new science. Doesn't make any sense. So I had to, reply in a nice manner. You cannot put that person down, but you have to say the right thing. So the question is, where is Sat? So there, the second answer also doesn't make any sense. That the Sat is not me, not here, but somewhere else. Because it violates the very definition of Sat. Cannot be. So the only third possibility is, I am the Sat. But but I have no experience of it. So this is where we have to kind of narrow our search, going from the broad mistake of there is no Sat to there is Sat that is somewhere else to I am the Sat. But yet, I don't feel it. I don't have that experience. If I'm the Sat, then how come I don't feel it? Aha! You are now narrowing down your answers very well. Swami Dayanandji, I remember in our satsang, will answer somebody who says, Swamiji, if I'm the Sat, then how come I don't feel it? Swamiji says, don't borrow my question. This is my question to you. That's exactly what, when you were asking me, I was about to ask you, how come you don't feel it? So don't borrow my question. That is my question to you. So this is the right way to look at it. So there Shastra says, so this is what is called in the Adi Shankara's style, Adi Shankara's style, which is the style of Bhagavad Gita also, of the teaching of any Shastra, is what is called Prasanna Gambhiryam. Gambhirata, Prasanna Gambhirata. So Gambhirata means serious, meaningful, profound. Gambhira means not just flighty, not just playing with balloons, but something which is profound, something you have to look at it. But Prasanna Gambhiryam, not serious means, oh my gosh, now there's a lot of work to do. What am I going to do? I don't like to do this, but I have to do this. Not like that. So the Gambhiryam is Prasanna Gambhiryam, means you discover that the truth is very beautiful. It's very rasatmaka. There should be rasa. And so there the Shastra says, yes, you are the truth, but you are not experiencing it because it is possible that experiences can be with knowledge or without knowledge. You can enjoy the sunset and sunrise without knowing that it doesn't set or rise, or you can do it with knowledge. The experience does not change, but the view of it becomes Vastutantram rather than Kartantram. So now we are narrowing down our search to what is the knowledge of my experience. Now we are talking. This is what we have to do. And so the rest of the Shastras all help us narrow down the analysis and the search of how is it that I am the truth, but I don't feel it. What is it? Why is it that you don't feel it? This is to break it down one thing at a time until you understand. So this is what we have done in the last few classes. So this is really more of a recap of it. And now we will proceed further in the next class. And now we will, so please remember this point already. I will now not repeat all the rest of the Vyavaharika, Paramarthika, etc., but be ready to consult your notes before the next class, and we will now go into what approaches we should take in order to transform the experience without knowledge into experience with knowledge. Okay? Om Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. So we did it. Thanks to everybody. A little late, but good.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So you were giving two examples. One is the Vivad Karanam, right? The example you gave. You said the nature of the material doesn't change. Like if milk curdles, that's Vyavharik Karanam, right?
The milk going into yogurt is Parinama Karanam.
Parinam Karanam. In Vivad Karanam, then the example you gave was like wave in the ocean.
Correct.
The water and wave.
Correct.
The nature of the material has not changed, but the form does change.
Yeah. So the form does change, and so this is what Srishti is. The Srishti, Bhagavan's Srishti means either you have no creation whatsoever, no play, no Vyavahara whatsoever. And that happens for, by the way, half the time. Half the time of the entire, this is complete pralaya, which is about, if I keep forgetting this, I think it's $50 million, 50 million years. 50 million years, I guess money in my mind. 50 million years, there is nothing. You want to give it 100% of the time? No. You are asleep for 1/3 of the time. Don't you want to wake up and have some transactions? So yeah, there is some form, but it's a non-changeable form. Yeah. Yeah. It's a beautiful Srishti, which doesn't end in problems. There is a semblance of problems, but it ends in beauty. What is Srishti?
Is Prakriti part of Shasti?
Prakriti is part of Srishti, and in fact the Prakriti is a very interesting word It's called Prakarshena Kriti. If you know many of these musicians, they will say, मैं आपको कृति सुनाता हूँ. I will now present a new composition. So kriti means a composition. It's some kind of a vichara. Prakarshena kriti means very well done. A kriti which is very well done is called prakriti. So prakriti, which is nature, is extremely well done. It all works so well. What a creation. So yeah, prakriti is also part of the Shrishti itself, yes. Yeah.
In a lighter vein, nothing to do with this, about Einstein. He had two cats at like one big and one small. So and it was disturbing him in the night to open the door for it to come down. So he called the carpenter, asked him to make two holes, one for the big cat, two for the small. So the carpenter told him, let's make only one.
Yeah, so the example given, which I remember that example so well. It was so even in the case of no, you know what? Wasn't it Einstein? I think it was Newton. I think Newton had two. I don't know. Maybe you're right. So they had. Newton had two, or whoever had two cats, one small and one big one. So he called the carpenter to make two holes, one for the small one and one for the big one. Imagine such a person, but for that particular moment, he said, made a mistake.
They didn't know about the law of relativity yet.
No? What is that?
They didn't know about the law of relativity yet.
Didn't know the law of relativity yet, yes. Yes.
Then Ishvara and Maya would be explained in the context of Jnanam and Pradnyanam?
Of course. So the question is, can Ishvara and Ishvara and Maya be explained in terms of Prajnanam and Jnanam? Of course. This is what will be doing. Absolutely. It already is. That is really the same thing. Yeah.
You know, I was reading through some text, and Maya had always, the falsity of the world in Maya had always confused me a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I was thought, well, we see things, how can they be so false? And then I was reading one of the Swamis, I don't remember which one, or maybe I was hearing to one, and basically it said that Maya is all in thoughts, right? There's a tree, for example, there's a tree there. There's a projection of the tree in your mind, so it comes from the thought that the actual absolutity of the tree is immaterial. Like for a blind person, because the netras are not giving them the stimulus, they're not going to see the tree, right? So everything, the Maya is all entirely created by your mind.
Yeah, because the Rani's question is, the Maya she feels is created by the mind, of course. Yeah, So this is all part of that home analysis. So when we do all of that, it will become very factual to you. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
What I'm kind of saying is that I read about that Maya is created by your mind, but I never really got it till, I don't know, just recently when I was reading some analysis.
Rani feels that she had been reading about Maya for a long time, but wasn't until recently that she could see the relevance of it vis-a-vis her mind and how the mind is. Yeah, that's exactly what happens, This is what's the whole process of Shravanam and Mananam. Many times in my case, I have been reading the same thing over a long time, but it doesn't strike me until my mind has developed to do that. And then it just all of a sudden, even the truthfulness of Sat and so on, I mean, from the very beginning it said, you are the Sat, but I didn't, but now I'm beginning to see that. And so, yeah. Okay, well, I need to leave. And thank you, and we will see you.